Clara Whitcomb did not drop the pot. That was the thing nobody talked about afterward, how she stood there, stew steaming in both hands. The bench pulled from under her before she could sit, a room full of eyes, looking everywhere but at her face, and she did not spill a single drop. She just stood, quiet, burning from the inside out, with something that wasn't shame. It was older than shame, harder than shame, and the town had no name for it because they had never bothered to learn hers. If you've ever been looked through like you weren't there, stay with me. Subscribe to this channel. Follow this story all the way to the end and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The harvest supper at Red Willow Church was the one night a year when the whole town pretended it was kind. Long tables ran the length of the fellowship hall, weighted down with cornbread and roasted corn and venison pie and 3 kinds of preserves. Lanterns hung from the ceiling beams. Children ran in and out of the side door. The women of the Ladies' Aid Society stood near the front, smooth-faced and deliberate, in the way of people who have decided in advance exactly how much warmth they intend to extend and to whom. Clara Whitcomb arrived at 6:30 with a cast-iron pot of beef and root vegetable stew she had spent the better part of the afternoon cooking over the wash-house fire. It was good stew. She knew it was good stew. Her mother had taught her the recipe, and her mother had learned it from her own mother, and there was nothing in that pot that wasn't honest. She carried it through the side door because the front steps were crowded, set it on the serving table without being asked, and ladled portions for 4 people before anyone said a word to her. That was how she had learned to exist in Red Willow, by making herself useful before anyone could think of a reason to object. The room was loud with the particular noise of a community that believed itself to be wholesome. Clara found a gap at the far end of one of the long tables near the window, away from the center of the room. She was not trying to be seen. She was only trying to sit down. She had been on her feet since dawn. The wash house where she rented the back room from old Hester Finch required her to be up before the sun to heat the water barrels, and she had done laundry for 7 households that week, and her shoulders ached, and all she wanted was to sit down and eat a bowl of the stew she had made, and listen to the noise of other people being alive around her. She reached for the bench. Margaret Colby pulled it sideways. It was a small movement, just a shift of weight, a slide of wood on plank floor. But it was deliberate, and it was witnessed, and it produced exactly the result Margaret Colby intended, which was that Clara's hand found nothing, and her body lurched forward, and she had to grab the table edge to keep from going down. Laughter broke from somewhere to her left. A man's laugh, rough and satisfied. Bad luck shouldn't eat with honest families. The voice belonged to Tom Pryor, who ran the grain supply and considered himself a wit. He did not look at Clara when he said it. He said it to the table generally the way a man says something he knows will land something he has probably been waiting all evening to say. Clara straightened. She did not look at Margaret Colby. She did not look at Tom Pryor. She stood with her spine vertical and her jaw set, and the back of her neck burning, and she looked at the far wall above everyone's heads, at a painted wooden cross that hung there with the words "Grace and Truth" carved beneath it. Nobody moved to offer her a seat. Nobody said anything to correct what had just happened. The preacher's wife, Dorothy Alcott, was 3 feet away. She looked down at her plate. "Clara!" The voice came from behind her. She turned. It was Hester Finch, 70 years old, bent at the spine, wiping her hands on a dishcloth. Old Hester was the only person in Red Willow who had treated Clara as a human being without requiring anything in return for it. "Don't stand there in the open, child. Come help me carry the bread." It wasn't comfort. It was just a task. But it was a reason to move, and Clara moved. She spent the next 20 minutes carrying bread and refilling the water pitchers, and doing the work that needed doing, the way she always did, quietly, capably, without being asked twice. She ate standing up near the kitchen door, a bowl she served herself while no one was watching. The stew was good. She knew it was good. She ate it without tasting it. She was thinking about the letter. It had arrived 4 days earlier, slipped under the washhouse door, with the kind of deliberateness that meant someone wanted her to find it first thing in the morning and spend the whole day dreading it. It was from Silas Crowley's office. Silas Crowley was the man who held the paper on half the property in Red Willow County including Hester Finch's washhouse, and the letter informed Clara Whitcomb that her arrangement to rent the back room would terminate in 7 days by order of the property holder, as the space was required for other purposes. Other purposes. She had turned that phrase over in her mind for 4 days. She knew what it meant. It meant Silas Crowley did not want her there. She had never spoken to Silas Crowley directly. She had never done anything to Silas Crowley. But Red Willow was a small town, and she had been a widow for 3 years, and the story the town told about her, the story that had been told so many times it had hardened into fact, was that Clara Whitcomb had bad luck. The way some women had freckles built into her skin, inescapable, contagious if you stood too close. Her husband James had died of fever 18 months after their wedding. She had not caused his fever. No reasonable person could have argued she caused his fever. But James's mother had told anyone who would listen that Clara had been a poor wife and a cold woman, and that the grief of their marriage had weakened him. And because James's mother was Ruth Whitcomb, who had been in Red Willow for 40 years and whose family had built the second church, people had listened. Clara had stayed because she had nowhere else to go, and because leaving would have looked like an admission of something she had not done. She was still here 3 years later doing laundry for people who wouldn't eat with her cooking stew that they spooned into their bowls without meeting her eyes. The noise of the fellowship hall pressed in on all sides. Someone near the front began playing a fiddle. A child shrieked with laughter and ran past Clara's elbow. She pressed back against the kitchen doorframe. Then the front door opened. Silas Crowley came in the way a man comes in when he has timed his entrance. He was not a large man, medium height, sandy hair going gray at the temples, a town suit that cost more than anyone else's in the room. He wore it without apology. He smiled at people as he moved through the room, and they smiled back and created space for him the way water moves around a stone. He walked to the center of the room. He did not raise his voice particularly, but it carried. "I apologize for the interruption of your fine evening," he said. "But there is a matter of public record that I'm told it would be improper not to address directly." He reached into his breast pocket and produced a folded paper. "This is a notice of termination of residence for Miss Clara Whitcomb, currently occupying the washhouse annex on Finch property, effective 7 days from today." He looked around the room with pleasant neutrality. "I want it known that this action is consistent with community standards and was recommended to me by more than one respected member of this congregation." He folded the paper. He put it back in his pocket. He smiled. The room was very quiet except for the fiddle, which had stopped 3 sentences in. Clara stood in the kitchen doorway and felt the whole room looking at her, or deliberately not looking at her, which amounted to the same thing. She felt the heat in her face, and the steadiness in her hands, and the particular cold clarity that came to her sometimes, when things were worst, not calm exactly, but something beyond panic that she had learned to use. She did not speak. There was nothing to say that this room would have heard. She set her bowl on the nearest surface, walked to the side door, and pushed it open into the dark summer night. Outside the air was hot and dry, and smelled of horse and dust and the faint green edge of the grass that grew along the creek bed a quarter-mile west. The fiddle started again inside. She could hear it through the wall, bright and cheerful and indifferent. She stood on the step for a long moment. Then she walked. She did not know where she was walking exactly. She walked past the livery and the hardware store, and the land office, and the row of 3 false front buildings on the north side of Main Street. A dog barked at her from behind a fence and stopped. The moon was nearly full, and the dust in the street held its light the way dust does, giving everything a pale washed quality that was almost beautiful if you weren't thinking about where you were going to sleep in 7 days. She stopped walking when she reached the notice board outside the post office. She had passed this board every day for 3 years. It held the usual collection livestock for sale, a missing horse, a woman seeking seamstress work, a reward notice for a man who had passed bad notes in Laramie. She read them without meaning to, the way you read anything that's in front of your eyes, and then she saw it. It was nailed lower than the others on a piece of rough-cut board, the writing done in thick pencil strokes that pressed hard into the wood. Whoever had written it had not been concerned with elegance. Ranch help wanted. Must work hard and keep your mouth shut about what ain't your business. Full days. Room and meals provided. Wages discussed on arrival. No troublemakers and no gossips. Ask for Elias Mercer. Mercer Ridge, 3 miles northwest. She read it twice. She thought about 7 days. She thought about Silas Crowley's face in the fellowship hall, the way he had folded the paper and put it back in his pocket like it was something ordinary. Like she was something ordinary. Like the whole business of removing her from her home in front of a room full of people was a minor administrative matter. She reached up and unpinned the notice. She folded it once. She put it in her apron pocket next to the ledger pencil that had been her father's. Then she walked back to the wash house, washed her face in cold water, and lay down on her cot without undressing. She did not sleep for a long time. She left before dawn. She did not tell Hester Finch where she was going because Hester Finch would have worried, and Clara had no patience for being worried about. She left a note that said she would be back by midday, which may or may not have been true. She took nothing with her except her coat and her father's ledger pencil and the folded notice in her pocket. The road northwest out of Red Willow was not really a road. It was a set of wagon ruts through dry grass running between low hills that were golden in the early heat. The sun came up behind her while she walked and laid her shadow long and thin out in front of her, pointing the way. 3 miles felt like more in that heat on that particular morning. When she saw the gate, she knew it before she read the name. There was a quality to neglect that was recognizable at a distance, the way a fence sags where the wire has given, the way weeds take over where attention has been absent. The gate was wood and iron unpainted now, though it had been painted at some point, and the name Mercer Ridge was worked into the iron in letters that were still solid, even if everything around them was tired. She pushed the gate open. There was a man working near the barn, not at the barn near it, crouched down beside a section of fence that had partially collapsed. His back was to her. He was working with wire and pliers, and the focused silence of someone who has been at a thing too long and is not going to stop until it's done regardless. "Mr. Mercer," she said. He turned. He was older than she'd expected from the handwriting. Mid-30s, she thought, dark brown hair, dark eyes, a short beard, and the kind of face that had been weathered by something beyond just sun. He wore a dusty gray shirt and a dark brown vest, and he looked at her with an expression that was not quite unfriendly and not quite welcoming and was mostly just direct. "That's me," he said. He straightened up. He was taller than she'd expected, too. "You're a ways from town." 3 miles, Clara said. "I walked." He looked at her for a moment. Not up and down, just at her face the way some men did, and most didn't. "You saw the notice." "I saw the notice." "Then you know I want someone who works hard and doesn't ask questions that aren't their business." "I know how to work," Clara said. "I don't have any particular interest in your business unless it relates to what you're paying me to do." He studied her. There was something going on behind his eyes that she couldn't quite read. Not suspicion exactly, calculation maybe. The kind of assessment a man makes when he is low on options and knows it. "What's your name?" "Clara Whitcomb." Something shifted in his expression, just slightly, just enough to tell her that he knew the name. "Town told me not to hire you," he said. It wasn't said cruelly. It was said the way a man states a fact he is deciding whether to act on. "The town," Clara said, "has been wrong about me for years." Silence. A fly moved through the hot air between them. Somewhere in the barn, a horse moved in its stall and stamped. Elias Mercer looked at the fence he had been working on. He looked at the barn. He looked at her face. "Can you cook?" "Yes." "Can you keep accounts?" She paused. That surprised her. It wasn't what hired help was usually asked. "My father was a bookkeeper. I learned from him." "Can you handle livestock? Not just feed and water, I mean real work, sick animals, fence repair, moving a herd when you have to." "I've done all of it," Clara said. "My father ran a small operation outside Cheyenne before he died. I helped him from the time I could carry a bucket." Elias was quiet for a long moment. "The town said you bring ruin," he said. "The town said that about a woman who cooked their supper last night and wasn't given a place to sit," Clara said. "I'll let you judge the source." He almost smiled. It didn't quite get there, just a shift at the corner of his mouth gone as fast as it came. "Room's above the supply store," he said. "Small. There's a window that sticks. Meals are at the main house. Wages are $12 a month to start, and we'll talk more if you prove out." He picked up his pliers. "You'll start today." "I'll start now," Clara said. He looked at her. "The fence," she said. He handed her the other set of pliers without comment. They worked side by side in the heat for the next hour, neither of them speaking except for what the work required. She knew what she was doing, she could feel that he saw. She knew what she was doing, and there was a particular satisfaction in that, not pride exactly, but something close to it, something that had been absent for 3 years. When they had finished the section and moved to the next, Elias said without looking at her, "The bank is on my back. Has been for 2 years. I need this ranch to survive the fall sale, or I lose it." "All right," Clara said. "The accounts are a mess. I know they're a mess. I haven't had the time or the—" He stopped. "They need someone who knows what they're looking at." "I can look at them," Clara said. "Tonight?" he said. "If you want." "Tonight," she agreed. They worked until noon. He did not thank her. She did not expect thanks. But when they walked back toward the main house and he held the gate open for her, it was not a performance. It was just what he did, and she walked through it, and neither of them made anything of it. Inside the house, she stood in the doorway of the main room and looked at what she was working with. The place was not dirty. He was not a dirty man, but it had the spare, hollow quality of a space where someone lived functionally without living fully. A single chair near the fireplace. A table with one setting. Shelves with tins and a few books. A window with no curtain. A house waiting, she thought, for something it didn't know how to ask for. "The accounts are in the desk," Elias said behind her. "Second drawer." She went to the desk. She opened the second drawer. She pulled out a ledger that was 3 years deep in entries and looked at the first page and then the second and then the third. Her father's ledger pencil was already in her hand. She didn't remember taking it out. "Mr. Mercer," she said quietly. "Mercer," he said. "Or Elias. Either." "Elias." She looked at the page in front of her. "When did Silas Crowley start holding your mortgage?" A pause from behind her. 2 years ago this spring," he said. "Why?" "Because," Clara said, "these numbers don't add up, and I want to know why they don't add up before I say another word about it." She turned to the next page. Her father's pencil moved. Outside, the summer heat pressed against the windows, and the cattle made their distant sounds, and the ranch went on existing in its tired, stubborn way. The way things exist when they are not yet finished, but do not quite know how to survive. Clara Whitcomb had 7 days to find somewhere to exist. She had already started. The numbers did not lie. That was the thing about numbers, they never did. People lied. Memories lied. Town gossip lied with a kind of cheerful persistence that Clara had stopped being surprised by years ago. But a ledger entry was a ledger entry, and when the figures in Elias Mercer's second drawer told her that he had been paying 31% above the county average for feed grain since the spring of 1882, she believed the figures and not the explanation that had presumably been given at the time. She worked through the evening without stopping. Elias had gone out to do the last check on the cattle and came back to find her still at the desk. A second candle lit her father's pencil, moving in short, precise strokes across the sheet of paper she had pulled from her coat pocket to use as a working ledger. He stood in the doorway for a moment without speaking. "You haven't eaten," he said. "I noticed," she said without looking up. He went to the kitchen. She heard him moving around in there. Not the helpless sounds of a man who had never cooked, but the efficient, minimal sounds of a man who cooked because he had to, and had made his peace with that. 20 minutes later, he set a plate on the corner of the desk. Salt pork and beans, and 2 biscuits that were better than she expected. She ate without sitting back from the desk. "Well," he said. He had taken the chair by the fireplace and he was watching her with his arms on his knees, not impatiently, just watching. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me straight," Clara said. "All right. Did anyone ever sit down with you and go through these numbers line by line? Anyone from Crowley's office, a lawyer, anyone?" Elias was quiet for a moment. "My wife used to keep the books. When she died, I did it myself as best I could. Crowley's man came out twice. He told me the figures were standard for the territory and that I was behind because of the drought year." "The drought year?" Clara said. 62. Bad year. Half the county lost cattle." "You lost cattle in 62. 30 head, nearly broke us." Clara turned the ledger so the page faced him and put her finger on a column of figures. "This is your feed cost from March of 82. This is the county average I'm calculating from your neighbor billings. I'm using the Callahan invoice you kept in the back pocket here as a baseline." She moved her finger. "The difference on feed alone over 2 years is $417. Elias stared at the page. "That's before I get to the repair charges," Clara said. "What repair charges?" "Someone billed your account for fence repair in October of 82. $40. Did anyone repair your fence in October of 82? Silence. "Elias." "No," he said. His voice had gone flat. "No one repaired my fence in October of 82. I repaired my own fence in October of 82. Clara turned to the next page. "There's a charge for water rights assessment in January of 83. $22. Did you request a water rights assessment?" "I did not." "There's a charge for—" "Stop." His voice wasn't loud, but it stopped her. He stood up from the chair, and she watched something move through him that was beyond anger. It was the particular devastation of a man who has been working himself into the ground for 2 years, believing he was losing because of bad luck and drought and his own failures, and is now being told that someone was also stealing from him the whole time. "Just stop for a moment." She stopped. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to her, one hand on the frame. She gave him the moment. She understood what it cost a man to stand in his own house and realize it had been quietly taken from him piece by piece. "How much?" he said finally. "I don't have the full number yet. I need to go through the mortgage documents. But the overcharges I've found so far in the operating account are just over $600. She paused. "That's not counting whatever is in the mortgage terms themselves." He turned around. His face was controlled, but just barely. "Crowley," he said. "His name is on every document," Clara said. "I'm not ready to say more than that yet because I want to be sure before I say anything I can't take back." He looked at her for a long time. "You found all this in one evening?" "My father kept books for a mining company in Cheyenne for 11 years, Clara said. "He used to say that a crooked ledger was like a bad tooth. It hurts in one place, but the rot goes further." She closed the ledger carefully. "I'll need the mortgage documents tomorrow, and if you have any county filings, land transfer records, tax receipts, anything from the recorder's office, I need those too." "I'll get them," Elias said. She nodded and began stacking the papers neatly. "Clara." She looked up. "Why are you doing this?" he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a genuine question, and she could see it cost him something to ask it a man who was not accustomed to receiving help without a price attached. She thought about the harvest supper, about Margaret Colby's hand on the bench, about Silas Crowley's voice in the fellowship hall, pleasant and public and precise. "Because the numbers are wrong," she said. "And wrong numbers bother me. I don't need a better reason than that." He almost smiled again. It was the same as before there, and then gone. "Good night, Miss Whitcomb," he said. "Clara," she said. "Clara," he said. She walked to the room above the supply store. The window stuck as promised. She forced it open with the heel of her hand, lay down on the narrow cot, and was asleep in 4 minutes. The heifer went down at 6 in the morning. Clara was crossing the yard with a bucket when she heard the sound. Not a cry exactly, but a low, heavy, wrong kind of groan that an animal makes when its body is betraying it. She set the bucket down and moved toward the pasture fence without thinking. The heifer was a young animal, reddish-brown, one of the better ones from the looks of her, and she was down on her side near the far post with her legs working against the ground in the mindless way of a creature in serious distress. Clara was over the fence before she fully decided to be. She crouched beside the animal and pressed her hands to the left flank and felt what she expected to feel, the tight, drum-hard distension of a cow that had bloated badly. She had seen it twice before on her father's operation. Once they had saved the animal. Once they hadn't. What's happening? Elias was at the fence then, through it covering the ground fast. Bloat, Clara said. How long has she been like this? I don't know, Does she matter to your fall sale? She's one of the best I've got. Then go to the barn and bring me the trocar. You have one. He looked at her. You know how to use a trocar. My father's neighbor had dairy cattle, Clara said. Go get it. Now, Elias. She doesn't have much time. He went. She stayed with the animal, talking to her in a low, steady voice that was more for keeping herself focused than for the heifer's comfort, her hands moving over the tight flank gauging. Two of the ranch hands had appeared at the fence. She felt them watching her without looking up. Elias came back with the trocar, and she took it from him without ceremony. Found the right point on the left flank, high up in the paralumbar fossa, where her father's neighbor had shown her twice, and she drove it in clean and true. The release of gas was immediate and audible. The heifer's legs stopped working. Her body began to settle. One of the ranch hands said something under his breath that was not quite a word. Clara kept her hands steady and her attention on the animal and did not look at anyone until the heifer had stabilized enough to sit up on her own. Then she sat back on her heels and let out a breath she had been holding for the last 4 minutes. She'll need watching today, Clara said. Keep her off the wet grass. If she goes down again, don't wait. Elias was looking at her with an expression that was somewhere between astonishment and something she didn't have a name for. Where did you learn that? He said. From watching someone who knew what they were doing, Clara said. She stood up and wiped her hands on her apron. Your ranch hands can take it from here. She picked up her bucket and walked back toward the house. Behind her, she heard one of the hands say quietly, but not quietly enough. Boss, where'd you find her? She heard Elias say. She found me. She kept walking. By the end of the first week, the shape of the ranch had begun to change in ways that were small, but not invisible. Clara reorganized the kitchen stores so nothing was wasted. She adjusted the feeding schedule for the remaining cattle based on what she had read in the accounts about which weeks had produced the best weight gain. She repaired 3 places on the smokehouse wall where the chinking had cracked because she had the materials and the time and it needed doing. She worked the accounts every evening. The picture that emerged was uglier than she had first estimated. The overcharges in the operating account were one thing, but when Elias produced the mortgage documents, a thick stack of folded papers that had been living in a tin box under his bed, apparently untouched since the day he signed them, Clara began to find something that troubled her far more than inflated feed prices. These are recorded with the county land office, she said on the 5th evening, her finger on a line in the mortgage transfer document. You see this notation here? This is the date Crowley filed the lien transfer. It says February 14th, 1882. That's when I signed with him, Elias said. He was across the table watching her the way he had taken to watching her work, not hovering, just present, as if her focus helped him think. February 14th of 82, Clara said. But the Red Willow County Land Office didn't open for official recording until March of 82. It's in the territorial notice I found in the back of your deed folder. She looked up. Crowley filed a lien transfer with an office that didn't legally exist yet. Elias went very still. What does that mean? He said. It means his mortgage chain may have a flaw, Clara said. A real one, the kind that matters in front of a judge. She kept her voice level. She was not going to let herself get ahead of what she actually knew. I need to write to the county recorder in Cheyenne and ask for the official opening date on record. If it matches what I'm reading in this territorial notice, then Silas Crowley's claim on this ranch may not be as solid as he thinks it is." The silence in the room lasted a long time. "Write the letter tonight," Elias said. "I will," she said. She wrote the letter. She sealed it. She walked it to the Red Willow post office herself the next morning, paid the postage out of her first week's wages, and watched the postal clerk take it behind the counter. She felt the particular combination of calm and terror that comes from having done the right thing and not knowing yet whether the right thing will be enough. On the way back to the ranch, she passed Margaret Colby on the main street. Margaret Colby looked at her, then looked away. Deliberately. The same way you look away from something you've decided isn't worth your notice. Clara kept walking. The rumors started the following week. She didn't hear them directly. She never heard anything in Red Willow directly, because no one in Red Willow spoke to her directly if they could help it. She heard them the way she heard most things at an angle from Hester Finch, who had sent a note asking if Clara was settled, and who had included at the bottom in her cramped old handwriting, "Be careful of what they're saying in town about you and that man." She brought the note to Elias that evening. She did not perform distress about it. She handed it to him across the table and watched him read it. His jaw tightened. "Living in sin," he said. "That's what they're saying." "That would be my guess," Clara said. He set the note down. "Does it bother you?" "It bothers me less than being evicted bothered me," she said. "What bothers me is what it means for your bank extension. Crowley is not just gossiping for the pleasure of it. He wants the bank to refuse you." Elias looked at her. "You think he's behind this?" "I think Silas Crowley has been running the same play on this county for years," Clara said. "Create pressure from two directions, financial and social, until the target has no room to stand. Then step in and pick up the land." She folded her hands on the table. "I think he found out somehow that we're looking at his paperwork, and I think these rumors are his response." "How would he know we're looking at his paperwork?" "Because Red Willow is a small town," Clara said, "and I walked to the post office myself. He absorbed this." "He's going to move faster," Clara said. "Whatever he's planning, he'll move faster now. We need the letter back from Cheyenne before he does." "How long?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. He pushed back from the table and stood and walked to the window. She watched his back, the set of his shoulders, the particular tension of a man measuring what he has against what he needs. "There's something I haven't told you," he said. She waited. "My wife's family loaned me money when Margaret died. Part of the ranch operating debt, not the mortgage, a separate note is owed to her brother Ed Rollins in Laramie. Ed is a decent man, but he can't carry me forever." He turned around. "The fall cattle sale has to go. There's no other option. If I don't sell enough head in September to cover the operating debt and make a partial payment on the mortgage, Ed calls the note in, and Crowley forecloses inside 30 days. Clara looked at him. "How much do you need from the sale?" $1,100 minimum. She turned back to the accounts. She did not say what she was thinking, which was that $1,100 in 8 weeks from a herd in the condition this herd was in was possible, but only barely, and only if nothing else went wrong between now and September. "We need to move the herd to the north pasture," she said. "The grass count is better up there. I looked at the terrain last Tuesday. And we need to pull Crowley's false charges from the operating account and document them as disputed before the sale so the bank can see the actual financial picture without the inflation." He stared at her. "You went and looked at the north pasture," he said. "I walk in the mornings," she said. "I was curious." He looked at her for a moment, in a way she couldn't entirely decode, not quite the astonishment of the heifer morning. Something quieter than that. Something that had been building, she thought, over the past 10 days. Accumulating the way interest accumulates a little at a time, until one day you look at the figure and it's something serious. "All right," he said. "North pasture. We'll start moving them Thursday." "Wednesday," Clara said. He almost smiled. "Wednesday," he said.
"Das sei."
They moved the herd on Wednesday in air so hot it shimmered above the grass and made the cattle sluggish and resistant and difficult. Clara worked the left flank with a borrowed horse and a determination that surprised even herself. Elias worked the right. The two ranch hands, a young man named Pete Alderman and an older man everyone called Dutch, worked the rear. By midday, they had covered half the distance. By late afternoon, when the herd was finally settled in the north pasture and Clara had dismounted and was standing at the fence with her arms over the top rail, just breathing, she became aware that Elias was standing a few feet away, doing the same thing. "You can ride," he said. "My father taught me," she said. "Was there anything your father didn't teach you?" She considered the question seriously. "He never taught me how to make a man feel small without knowing he was doing it," she said. "He wasn't built that way." Elias looked at her. "The town," she said. "The way they talk. My father couldn't understand it when he was alive. He used to say the meanest people he ever met were the most frightened ones." "He was probably right," Elias said. They stood at the fence and the cattle settled and the afternoon light moved. "My wife was like your father," Elias said after a while. "Margaret. She thought the best of people as long as she possibly could." He stopped. "It wasn't a weakness in her. It was just how she was built. Like a house with all the windows open." He paused. "I shut mine after she died. Every one of them." Clara did not fill the silence. "I don't know why I'm telling you that," he said. "You're telling me because you've been alone in this house for 2 years, and it got to be too much to carry alone," Clara said. "That's a plain human thing. There's no apology needed for it." He looked out at the cattle. "You don't let things be more complicated than they are," he said. "I grew up poor," Clara said. "Complicated is a luxury." He laughed. A real one, short and low and surprised out of him. She hadn't heard him laugh before. It changed the whole topography of his face. She looked away before he could see her noticing. Dutch found her the next morning before she had finished her coffee. He knocked on the supply store door with the particular knock of a man who has bad news and has decided to come out with it quickly. She opened the door and read his face before he said a word. "What happened?" she said. "Fence line on the south quarter," Dutch said. "4 sections down, cattle are in the road." She set her coffee down. "When Pete found it 20 minutes ago, it wasn't whether the wire's been cut." She looked at him. "Cut," she said. "Clean through," Dutch said. "3 places. Whoever did it knew what they were doing." She picked up her coat. "Get Elias," she said. "Already done," Dutch said. "He's saddling up." The 4 of them spent the next 3 hours recovering the cattle from the road and the neighboring property and repairing the fence line. Clara worked the wire with Dutch while Elias and Pete pushed the cattle back. She didn't speak much. She was thinking. Clean cuts. 3 locations. Done in the dark because the ground around the posts showed boot prints that hadn't been there yesterday morning. She'd walked that fence line 2 days ago, and she knew where she'd walked. Someone had come onto this ranch last night and cut the wire on purpose. When the last section was repaired and the cattle were back where they belonged, Elias came to stand beside her. She showed him the cuts. She showed him the boot prints. She showed him where the wire ends were not torn, not rusted through cut. He crouched down and looked at the wire for a long time without speaking. "Crowley," he said. "Or someone who works for him," Clara said. "We can't say it was him directly." "But you think it was him." "I think it was a warning," she said. "He knows we're looking at his papers. This is him telling us what he'll do if we keep looking." Elias stood up. His voice when he spoke was very quiet, which she had come to understand was a more serious thing in him than loudness would have been. "I've been on this ranch for 12 years, he said. "My father built the first barn. My wife is buried on the East Hill." He looked at the fence. "I am not going to let Silas Crowley take this land." "Then we keep looking," Clara said. "We keep looking," he said. She looked at him. Something had shifted between them over the past 2 weeks, not dramatically, not with any announcement, but the way things shift when 2 people have worked side by side through real difficulty and have not found each other lacking. She would not have called it trust exactly, not yet. But it was in the same family as trust. It was what trust looks like before it finishes becoming itself. "The letter from Cheyenne," she said. "It could still be 10 days. I know. We need to keep the herd healthy. Keep the accounts clean. Don't give Crowley anything real to use." "I know that too," he said. "And we should tell Birch Callahan about the wire," she said. "He's your neighbor. He's respected. If this comes to a fight in front of the town, you want a witness who saw the aftermath." Elias looked at her. "You're thinking ahead to a public fight. I'm thinking ahead to whatever comes next," Clara said. "Because Silas Crowley is not going to stop at cut fences." She was right about that. She did not know yet exactly how right she was. But the answer was coming. It had already left Crowley's office. It was moving toward them like weather, like a thing you can see on the horizon before it arrives, and the only question was whether you used that time or stood there watching it come. Clara Whitcomb had never been good at standing still. She picked up her tools and walked back toward the barn, and the work that still needed doing, and behind her the repaired fence held, and the cattle moved in the north pasture, and the summer heat pressed down on everything like a hand that had no intention of lifting. The letter from Cheyenne arrived on a Tuesday, 12 days after Clara had walked it to the post office herself and paid the postage out of her own wages. She was at the desk when Dutch brought it in, still in his work coat, the envelope slightly bent from being carried in his breast pocket across the yard. He set it in front of her without a word, and she looked at the return address, County Recorder's Office, Laramie, Wyoming Territory, and felt something tighten in her chest that was not quite hope and not quite fear, but lived in the space between them. She did not open it immediately. She went to the barn door and called for Elias. He came from the south fence, where he had been working with Pete, still carrying his pliers, a line of sweat across his collar. He read her face before he read the envelope. "It came," he said. "It came," she said. They went inside together. She sat at the desk. He stood behind her left shoulder, close enough that she could hear him breathing. She broke the seal on the envelope and unfolded the single page inside and read it once to herself before she read it aloud. The Red Willow County Land Office, per official territorial charter, had opened for the recording of legal instruments on the 3rd day of March, 1882. Silas Crowley had filed Elias Mercer's mortgage lien transfer on February 14, 1882. 17 days before the office legally existed. Clara set the letter down on the desk. "He filed before the office opened," Elias said. His voice was completely flat. "Which means the filing is irregular at best," Clara said. "At worst it's void. An instrument recorded with an office that has no legal authority to receive it may not be a valid instrument at all." She picked up her father's pencil. "I'm not a lawyer, Elias. I want to be clear about that. But I have read enough of your father's territorial filings to know that this is not a small problem for Crowley's chain of title." "What do we do with it?" "We document it," Clara said. "We write it down, clearly. Attach the letter from the recorder's office. Attach the territorial charter notice from your deed folder, and we build it into a single coherent record that anyone, a banker, a judge, a county official can read and understand without needing a lawyer to translate it." She was already writing. "And we do it today, because I don't think we have much time left." She was right about that, by a margin of less than 48 hours.
Chick Van.
Silas Crowley arrived at Mercer Ridge on Thursday morning with a deputy sheriff named Carl Briggs, a man Clara had seen once before in Red Willow, and whose defining characteristic, as far as she could tell, was that he went wherever Crowley pointed him. She was in the yard when they rode in. Elias came out of the barn behind her. Crowley dismounted with the ease of a man who had done this before, which she knew. She had found references in 3 separate county notices to ranches that had changed hands through Crowley's office in the last 4 years. Each one had a similar pattern: escalating charges, a sudden demand for full payment, a foreclosure that moved faster than it should have. He was wearing his town suit. It was already hot, and he was wearing his town suit. "Mercer," he said. He did not acknowledge Clara. "I'm here on a matter of contract." "You can state your business," Elias said. He had come to stand beside Clara, not in front of her, beside her. Crowley produced a document from his coat. Under the terms of your mortgage agreement, Section 4, Paragraph 2, you are in violation of the Conduct Clause, which prohibits the mortgagor from engaging in activities that bring disrepute upon the property or damage its standing with creditors. He smiled pleasantly. I'm referring to your domestic arrangement with Miss Whitcomb, which has been a matter of public discussion in Red Willow for the past 3 weeks. Deputy Briggs stood behind him and looked at the middle distance. I'm demanding immediate payment of the outstanding balance. Crowley continued. Or I will begin foreclosure proceedings by end of business Friday. The amount he named was $2,300. Clara heard Elias go very still beside her. She knew what that number meant to him. She knew exactly what it meant because she had been living in his accounts for 3 weeks. Crowley's eyes moved to her for the first time. I'd recommend, he said pleasantly, that you take whatever wages you're owed and find yourself another situation, Miss Whitcomb. You've done this man no favors. He paused. A widow who brings ruin wherever she sleeps. I believe that's the phrase the town has been using. She heard Elias take one step forward. Don't, she said, quietly. Not to stop him from defending her, she knew he wanted to, and some part of her registered that with a warmth she could not afford right now. She said it because she needed him to trust her, and she needed him to trust her right now in this moment. He stopped. She looked at Silas Crowley. Mr. Crowley, she said, I'd like to ask you a question. He looked at her with the expression of a man who finds an interruption mildly amusing. I don't see that you have standing to ask me anything, Miss Whitcomb. February 14th, 1882, Clara said. The amusement did not leave his face immediately. It drained slowly like water from a cracked vessel. She watched it go. I beg your pardon, he said. That's the date you filed the lien transfer on this mortgage with the Red Willow County Land Office, Clara said. February 14th, 1882. She reached into her coat pocket and produced the letter from the recorder's office, unfolded it, and held it so he could see the letterhead. The Red Willow County Land Office opened on March 3, 1882. That is a matter of official territorial record. The yard was completely silent. Deputy Briggs had stopped looking at the middle distance. A filing made with an office that has no legal authority to receive it, Clara said, is not a valid filing, which means your mortgage chain on this property may have no more legal standing than a piece of paper someone dropped in the street. Crowley's face had gone through several colors in the last 30 seconds. It had settled now on something pale and controlled, and she could see in his eyes the precise calculation of a man deciding how to respond when the person in front of him knows more than they should. That document, he said, is a clerical matter. Filings were routinely accepted by the transitional office before the formal charter date. It is standard territorial practice. Is it? Clara said. Then you'll be able to produce documentation of that practice when it's examined by the county court. She folded the letter and put it back in her pocket. Because I intend to see that it is examined. You are a hired hand on a failing ranch, Crowley said. His pleasantness was entirely gone now. What was underneath it was colder. You are not a lawyer. You are not a county official. You are a widow with a reputation that this county is well acquainted with, and I'd be very careful about what you threaten in front of a law officer. I'm not threatening anything, Clara said. I'm reading documents. That's what I do. Crowley turned to Elias. This woman is going to cost you the last thing you have left. I am offering you the opportunity to settle this quietly. Full payment by Friday, or... No, Elias said. One word, no elaboration. Crowley looked at him for a long moment. You're making a serious mistake, he said. I made a serious mistake 2 years ago when I signed with you, Elias said. I don't intend to make another one on your schedule. Crowley mounted his horse. Deputy Briggs followed still without having said a single word. At the gate, Crowley turned back. Friday, he said. End of business. He rode out. The dust settled. Elias let out a slow breath. What just happened? We bought ourselves a little time, Clara said. But only a little. He'll go to the bank today. He'll go to whoever in the county he has influence with. He's going to try to bury this before it can be examined. She was already moving toward the house. I need to write 2 more letters, one to Birch Callahan, one to the county court in Laramie. Callahan, Elias said, following her. Why Callahan? Because Birch Callahan has been ranching this county for 20 years, and people listen to him, Clara said. And because 3 weeks ago you told me he mentioned to you that his own mortgage fees had been running higher than expected. She looked at him. I think Crowley has done this to more than one ranch, Elias. I think if we can get Callahan to compare his documents to yours, we'll have more than an irregularity. We'll have a pattern. Elias stared at her. How long have you been thinking about Callahan? Since the morning after the fence was cut, she said. She sat down at the desk. She uncapped the ink. She began to write. Birch Callahan arrived the next morning on a gray horse earlier than she had expected, which told her something about how the letter had landed. He was a large man, 60 years old, with the slow, deliberate manner of someone who had learned that rushing things rarely improved them. He read the documents Clara laid out in front of him at the kitchen table with his hat in his hands and did not speak for a long time. Then he said, I want to see the charter date on my own filing. Do you have your mortgage documents here? Clara said. I can have them in 3 hours, Callahan said. He looked at Elias. I always thought those fees were high. My wife said I was too trusting. He was quiet for a moment. My wife is usually right. Bring the documents, Clara said. If what I think is there is actually there, we'll have something worth taking to a judge. He left. He came back in 2.5 hours. Clara went through his mortgage filing in 20 minutes. His lien transfer was dated January 31st, 1882. 31 days before the land office opened. She looked up at Callahan across the table. He did it to you too, she said. Callahan sat with that for a moment. That son of a... He stopped, looked at Clara. Beg your pardon, ma'am. Don't apologize, she said. I was thinking something considerably stronger. Friday came anyway. It always did. Clara had been awake since 4. She had organized the documents into a clear order, the recorder's letter, the territorial charter notice, the Mercer filing date, the Callahan filing date, the schedule of inflated charges, the false repair billings, the disputed penalties. She had written it all out in a clean hand on 3 sheets of paper, with annotations in the margins, the way her father had taught her to prepare anything that needed to stand on its own in front of a stranger. She was at the table when Elias came downstairs. He looked at the documents. He looked at her. You didn't sleep, he said. I slept some. Clara. There's coffee, she said. He poured it. He sat across from her. He looked at the organized papers and did not say what she could see he was thinking, which was that even with all of this, they did not know for certain what was coming today. The court letter had gone to Laramie, but Laramie was 3 days away, and today was Friday, and Crowley had said, end of business. Whatever happens today, Elias said, you should know. He stopped. Don't, she said gently. Not yet. Let's get through today first. He nodded. They drank their coffee in the early quiet, and the morning came on around them, and neither of them said anything more about what they were both thinking. He came at noon. He brought the deputy again, and this time he brought 2 other men she didn't recognize, town men in decent coats, the kind of men who served as witnesses when witnesses were needed. He also brought, and this was the part that told her he had planned it this way, 3 of the leading women of Red Willow's Ladies' Aid Society, including Margaret Colby. He had brought an audience. The yard filled up. Pete and Dutch came out of the barn. Birch Callahan, who Clara had sent word to at first light, rode in through the gate 5 minutes after Crowley arrived. He had 2 men with him, his son, and a neighboring rancher named Holt, whose family had been in the county 15 years. Crowley looked at Callahan, and his expression told Clara everything she needed to know about what Crowley had or hadn't expected this morning. This is a private matter between myself and Mercer, Crowley said. He was still pleasant. He was always pleasant. Funny thing about that, Callahan said. Doesn't feel too private when it's my name on a similar document. Margaret Colby said something to the woman beside her in a low voice. Crowley turned back to Elias. I'm here to formally notify you that foreclosure proceedings will begin. Mr. Crowley. Clara's voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. Something about the quality of it, the steadiness, the complete absence of apology, made the yard go quiet. She was standing at the top of the porch step with the document folder in her hands. You filed a lien transfer on this property on February 14, 1882, she said. You filed a lien transfer on the Callahan property on January 31, 1882. The Red Willow County Land Office did not open for legal recording until March 3, 1882. She held up the letter from the recorder's office. This is confirmed in writing by the county recorder in Laramie. She heard Margaret Colby stop talking. A mortgage instrument recorded with an office that had no legal authority to record it, Clara continued, is not a valid instrument. The lien you claim to hold on Mercer Ridge Ranch and the lien you claim to hold on the Callahan property were both filed before the recording office legally existed, which means the foundation of your foreclosure claim has no legal ground to stand on. Crowley's voice, when it came, had a new edge in it. This woman, Elias said from behind Clara, is the account manager of Mercer Ridge Ranch, and everything she just said is documented and is on its way to the county court in Laramie. I sent a second copy to the Territorial Land Commissioner's office in Cheyenne, Clara said, yesterday morning. The silence that followed was the particular silence of a crowd that has been watching a performance and has just understood that the ending is not what they came to see. Crowley pointed at her, not at Elias, at her. You have no idea what you've done, he said. His pleasantness was finished. What was underneath it was not cold anymore. It was hot, and that was more frightening. But she made herself hold his gaze and not move. I've read the documents you thought no one would open, Clara said. That's all I've done. You are a widow with nothing, he said. You have no property, no family, no standing in this county. You have been a public embarrassment to every community that's had the misfortune to... That's enough. Elias came down off the porch and stood in the yard, and the way he said those two words stopped everything. Deputy Briggs actually took a step back. You will not speak to her that way, Elias said. Not on this property, not anywhere I'm standing. Crowley looked at him, then back at Clara. Something moved through his expression. Calculation fury, and underneath both of those, the beginning of something that looked like fear. Real fear. The kind a man feels when the ground he thought was solid shifts under him. This isn't finished, he said. No. Clara agreed. It isn't. But it will be. Callahan urged his horse forward one step. Just one step. But Callahan was 60 years old and broad as a barn door, and had been in this county since before Crowley arrived, and one step from him meant something. I'd ride Silas, Callahan said. I'd ride, and I'd get yourself a very good lawyer, because you are going to need one. Crowley looked at the crowd, at the witnesses he had brought, who were no longer looking at him with the expressions he needed, at Margaret Colby, who had her hand pressed over her mouth and was staring at Clara with an expression that Clara could not fully read, but that had nothing of contempt in it. He rode. Both his men rode with him. The deputy was the last to go, and he looked back once at Clara before he followed, and she thought she saw something in his face that might have been relief. The yard held its breath for a moment after they were gone. Then Pete Alderman said from the barn doorway, "Is it over?" "Not yet," Clara said. "But we're still here." Callahan dismounted and walked to the porch and looked at Clara with the direct measuring look of a man who is revising his assessment of something and is not embarrassed to show it. "Miss Whitcomb," he said, "I have lived in this county for 20 years, and I have attended more land disputes than I care to remember." He paused. "I have never seen anyone do what you just did." "I read documents," Clara said. "That's all." "No, ma'am," Callahan said. "That is not all." He offered her his hand. She shook it. Behind her, she heard Elias let out a long, slow breath, the kind a man releases when he has been holding something so long he has forgotten what it feels like to set it down. Margaret Colby had not ridden with Crowley's other witnesses. She was still in the yard, standing back from the group, her hands folded in front of her. When Clara came down off the porch to begin the practical work of what came next, letters to send documents to copy Callahan's own records to integrate into the file, Margaret Colby said her name. Clara stopped. She turned. Margaret Colby was not a woman who looked uncertain. She had always been a woman who knew exactly where she stood. But standing there in the yard of Mercer Ridge Ranch, she looked uncertain. That was... She stopped. Started again. That was fine work, she said finally. Her voice was stiff with the effort of it. Clara looked at her for a moment. It was honest work, Clara said. There's a difference. She walked past her to where Callahan was waiting, and she did not look back, and the summer pressed down on all of it, the dust and the people and the repaired fence and the cattle in the north pasture, and Clara Whitcomb, who had carried a pot of stew into a room that wouldn't give her a seat, stood in the middle of what she had built and felt for the first time in 3 years the particular solid weight of a ground that would hold. The formal inquiry notice arrived from Laramie on a Monday, 8 days after Crowley had ridden out of the yard. Clara was the one who went to the post office. She went every morning now, early before the town was fully awake, because the letters she was sending and receiving were the kind that needed to arrive intact and unmeddled with. The postal clerk, a quiet man named Henderson, who had worked the Red Willow office for 6 years, had stopped pretending not to recognize her 2 weeks ago. He handed her the envelope without comment, and she nodded her thanks, and she walked back to the ranch with the envelope unopened in her coat pocket, because she had learned to wait for Elias before she opened the things that mattered to both of them. He was at the kitchen table when she came in. He had been waiting. She could see the coffee was poured 2 cups, and he had the look of a man who had been sitting with his own thoughts for longer than was comfortable. She set the envelope on the table between them. He looked at the return address. Wyoming Territory Office of the County Court, Laramie. He looked at her. "Open it," he said. She broke the seal. The inquiry was formal and official, and written in the particular language of territorial law that required reading twice to be certain you understood what it was actually saying. She read it twice. Then she set it down and translated. The county court has opened a formal review of all land instrument filings processed by the Red Willow County Land Office in the period between January 1st and March 2nd of 1882, she said. Silas Crowley's filings are specifically named. The review is expected to take 4 to 6 weeks. During that period, all foreclosure actions associated with instruments filed during that window are formally stayed. Elias was very still. "Stayed," he said. "That means he can't foreclose." "Not while the review is open," Clara said. "Not on you, not on Callahan, not on anyone whose filing falls in that window." She paused. "I counted 7 names in the territorial notice I found in your deed folder who had filings from that period. I sent their names to the court along with yours and Callahan's. All 7 are covered by the stay." He sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling and said nothing for a moment. "7, he said. 7 that I found," Clara said. "There may be more." He brought his gaze down from the ceiling and looked at her across the table. In the morning light, his face was tired, and something else, something that had been building behind his eyes for weeks, and that she had been carefully not looking at directly, because looking at it directly felt like a thing that required more courage than she had been ready to spend. "How did you know to send the other names?" he said. "Because a man who does something once and gets away with it usually does it again," Clara said. "And a man who does it again usually does it to as many people as he can before someone notices." She looked at the letter. "My father used to say that the best thing about a pattern is that it proves itself." "Your father," Elias said. "Sounds like he was a hell of a man." "He was," Clara said. "He would have liked this ranch." She had not meant to say that last part. It came out of a place she hadn't been watching closely enough and landed in the room between them, and she felt Elias hear it, really hear it, and she did not take it back. She picked up her pencil. "We have 4 to 6 weeks," she said. "We need to use every day of them." The work that followed was the hardest and the best of it. September was 6 weeks out, and the cattle sale was the only thing that stood between Elias and Ed Rollins's note coming due, and regardless of what the county court did or didn't do about Crowley's filings, that debt was real, and it was coming. Clara built the schedule with the same precision she had brought to everything else: which cattle to sell, which to hold back for winter, what price per head they needed to cover the operating debt and make a partial payment on the mortgage. What price would actually be possible, given the condition of the herd and the current state of the market? The numbers were tight. They were always tight. But they were honest numbers, which was the only kind she knew how to work with. 3 days after the inquiry notice arrived, Elias came to find her at the desk where she was working through the sale calculations, and he put a folded letter in front of her. "From Ed Rollins," he said, "in Laramie." She looked at him before she looked at the letter. "He heard," Elias said, "about Crowley, about the stay, about—" He paused. "About the woman who figured it out." She opened the letter. Ed Rollins wrote in a direct, plain hand that reminded her of her father's. He wrote that he had heard from Callahan, who had apparently written to him directly, and that he was extending the note by 60 days at no additional interest, and that he wanted Elias to know that he had not expected the ranch to be in better hands than it apparently was. He did not name Clara directly. He referred to her as your account manager. It was a small thing, and also not a small thing. Clara folded the letter carefully and set it on top of the inquiry notice. 60 days, she said. More room, Elias said. More room, she agreed. Don't waste it. He didn't. They worked the ranch the way people work something they are not willing to lose. She was up before dawn every morning, and so was he. And for the first hour of each day, they moved through the ranch doing the checks together. Cattle fences, water, the small repairs that accumulated overnight, the way small repairs always did. They did not talk much during those morning hours. They had both discovered that they were people who thought better in early quiet, and that working alongside someone else in early quiet was one of the less common and more reliable forms of comfort. The herd was improving. The north pasture had done what Clara predicted it would do. The grass was better, the water access more reliable, and 3 weeks of consistent feeding had put visible weight on the cattle that had been thin in July. Pete Alderman, who was 22, and had the instincts of someone who would be a very good rancher in 10 years, if he stayed at it, had started bringing his questions to Clara as often as he brought them to Elias, which she suspected Elias noticed and did not mind. Dutch noticed everything and said nothing, which was his particular form of approval. On the 12th day after the inquiry notice, a Thursday, Clara was in the supply room doing inventory when she heard horses in the yard, and something in the sound of them, too many moving too fast, made her put down the inventory sheet and walk to the door. 4 men. She didn't know 3 of them. The 4th was Deputy Carl Briggs, who had the look of a man who had been sent somewhere he would rather not be going. Elias came out of the barn. "Mercer," Briggs said. He did not look comfortable. "I've got a complaint filed against you, from Crowley. He's claiming you interfered with a lawful foreclosure proceeding, and that you're—" He glanced at Clara. "That Miss Whitcomb made false representations to a law officer." "False representations," Clara said. She stepped off the supply room step into the yard. "Which specific representation does he claim was false?" Briggs looked at her with the expression of a man who had not wanted this assignment and was finding it even less pleasant than anticipated. "He says the recorder's letter he says it was obtained under false pretenses, that you misrepresented yourself to the recorder's office." "I wrote a letter to the county recorder asking for the official opening date of the Red Willow Land Office," Clara said. "I signed my name to it. What misrepresentation does he allege specifically?" Briggs did not have a specific answer for that. She could see he did not have a specific answer, and she could see he knew she could see it. "He filed a complaint," Briggs said. I'm required to notify you." "All right," Clara said. "You've notified us. Is there anything in that complaint that supersedes the formal stay issued by the county court 8 days ago?" A pause. "The stay stands," Briggs said. "Crowley knows the stay stands. He stopped. Started again. Miss Whitcomb, I'm going to tell you something that is not part of my official business here. Crowley is not a man who accepts losing. He's going to keep pushing until someone makes him stop." "I know," Clara said. "I'm saying be careful." "I appreciate that," she said, and she did. She looked at him steadily. "Thank you, Deputy." He nodded once. He rode out with the 3 men she didn't know and did not look back. Elias came to stand beside her. "He warned you," Elias said. "He did?" "Briggs has been carrying Crowley's water for 2 years," Elias said. "Why is he warning you?" "Because Crowley overplayed his hand on Friday," Clara said. "He brought witnesses to watch him foreclose on a man's ranch, and instead, they watched him get run off by a hired hand with a ledger pencil." She looked at the gate. "Men like Briggs follow the winning side. He's reading the weather." "And which way is the weather going?" She looked at him. "Our way," she said. "If we don't make a mistake in the next 3 weeks." The sabotage came on a Saturday night, 2 weeks before the sale. She woke to the sound of the cattle, not ordinary sound, but the particular agitated bawl that meant something was wrong, something moving through the herd that shouldn't be there. She was out of her cot and pulling on her boots before she was fully awake, and she came out of the supply store into a dark that smelled of smoke. Not much smoke, not a fire. Something smaller. She ran. The north pasture fence had been opened. Not cut this time, unlatched. The gate swung wide, and someone had driven the cattle out through it, and onto the road, heading east away from the ranch. She could hear them in the dark, the sound of hooves on dry ground moving fast, because something had been used to push them. Elias was already at the gate when she got there, and Pete was behind him, and Dutch was coming across the yard with a lantern. "How many got out?" Elias said. "Can't tell yet," Pete said. "All of them," Dutch said. "Gate's been wide open. Something spooked them through." Clara looked at the gate. The latch had not been forced. It had been opened by someone who knew how it worked, which meant someone who had been on this property before. "We have to get them back tonight," she said. "If they scatter before dawn, we lose days rounding them up, and we can't afford days." "I know," Elias said. He was already moving to the barn for his horse. "I'll take the east road," Clara said. "Pete go north in case any turned at the fork. Dutch stay at the gate and count them back through." "You're not riding alone," Elias said. "You need to go south. They may have split at the creek bed," Clara said. "Elias, we don't have time to argue about this." He looked at her for one moment in the lantern light. "Be careful," he said. "Always," she said, and she went to saddle her horse. She found the first group of cattle a quarter-mile east, milling in the road, and already beginning to spread into the grass on either side. She pushed them back with the kind of focused, steady pressure her father had taught her not chasing, never chasing, just presence and persistence, and the right kind of noise until the animals moved where she needed them to go. It took 2 hours. When the last animal was back through the north pasture gate and Dutch had latched it behind them, the sky was beginning to gray in the east. She dismounted at the fence and put her forehead against her horse's neck for a moment and let herself be tired. Elias came in from the south road 20 minutes later. He had found 11 heads scattered along the creek bed and had pushed them back alone. He dismounted beside her. He was breathing hard. He looked at the cattle settled now, and at the gate, and at her. "All of them," he said. "All of them," she said. He put his hand on the fence post and leaned on it, and she watched him close his eyes for just a moment. "Someone is going to keep coming," he said. "Yes," she said. "Until the sale is done, and the money is in the bank, and the court has ruled on Crowley's filings, someone is going to keep coming." "Yes," she said. He opened his eyes. "I'm going to ask Callahan if one of his men can ride the perimeter at night until the sale." "That's a good idea," she said. "Was that your idea first?" "2 days ago," she said. He almost laughed. It was a tired laugh, the kind that comes out in the early morning after a hard night, but it was real. "Clara," he said. "Don't," she said gently. She knew what was in his voice. She could hear the weight of it. "Get some sleep first." "I need to say it." She looked at him. In the early gray light, his face was open in a way she had never seen it, not vulnerable exactly, but honest. The shuttered look completely gone, like a man who has decided that the windows have been closed long enough. "This ranch was standing before you came," he said. "But it wasn't alive. It was just standing." He stopped. "I was just standing?" She did not look away. "You didn't do this for the wages," he said. "I know that. I've known it for a while. You could have taken your first week's pay and found another situation, and no one would have blamed you. You stayed because—" He stopped again. "Because the numbers were wrong," she said softly. "Clara. And because I was tired of leaving," she said. "Every place I've ever been in my life, something happened and I left. Or I was made to leave. And I decided in your yard 3 weeks ago that I was finished deciding to go before I was ready." She held his gaze. "That's all. That's the whole of it." "That's not all," he said. "And we both know it's not all." The cattle moved in the pasture behind them. Dutch's lantern made its way back toward the barn. The sky was getting lighter. "Get some sleep," she said again. But her voice was different this time, and they both heard the difference. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair back from her face with 2 fingers, carefully the way a man touches something he is not certain he is allowed to touch. She did not move away. "After the sale," he said. "After the sale," she agreed. The sale was set for the 3rd Saturday in September in the auction yard on the south edge of Red Willow, and it arrived the way important days always arrived, faster than expected and heavier than you were ready for. Clara had the numbers memorized. She knew the minimum price per head they needed. She knew the reserve price Elias had set on the best animals. She knew exactly what margin they had to play with and how little room existed for anything to go wrong. Everything went wrong, not catastrophically, not in any single dramatic way. The way things go wrong when you are right at the edge in a series of small bad events that stack up against each other like rocks on a scale. The buyer from Cheyenne, who had been expected to drive up the bidding on the top cattle, did not arrive. His agent showed up late, and with a revised limit that was 15% below what they had anticipated. The first group through the ring sold for $6 less per head than the minimum target. A second-tier buyer got into a dispute with the auctioneer over a previous transaction and walked out before Clara's third group came through. She was standing at the fence with the tally book, keeping the running total in real time, and she watched the number fall short of where it needed to be, and she did the math 3 times, because she did not want to believe the math. They were going to come up short. Not by much. Maybe $200. Maybe $180. But short was short, and short meant Ed Rollins' note, and short meant everything they had done in the past 6 weeks had not been enough. She looked at Elias across the ring. He was watching the cattle. He didn't know yet. She hadn't told him the running total in the last 20 minutes, because she hadn't wanted to break his concentration, and because she had still been hoping the next group would push it over. The next group had not pushed it over. She was still doing the math, still looking for the number she needed, when she heard a voice behind her. "What are you short?" She turned. Birch Callahan was standing at her shoulder with his arms on the fence rail, watching the ring. She looked at him. Don't tell me you don't know," he said. "You've had a tally book in your hand for 3 hours. What are you short?" She looked at the book. Somewhere between $160 and $200 depending on the last group. Callahan was quiet for a moment. He watched the ring. "Mercer helped me when my bull broke through his fence 3 years ago," he said. "He spent 2 days helping me repair it and wouldn't take a cent." He paused. "My wife never forgot it." He looked at Clara. "Neither did I." She understood what he was telling her. Birch. It's not charity, he said. It's a neighbor doing what neighbors do. He looked back at the ring. You can pay me back out of next season's accounts. I know you're good for it. She felt something rise in her throat that she refused to let become anything visible. She pressed it back down. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me, he said. Just keep those books straight. The last group came through the ring, and the gavel came down, and Clara added the final number to the tally, and the total came to $1,140 plus Callahan's contribution, which put them at $1,310. Enough for Ed Rollins. Enough for the partial mortgage payment. Enough. She closed the tally book. She looked up and found Elias across the ring, and he was already looking at her. He had been reading her face. She realized for the last 20 minutes watching for the signal, and she gave it to him now, a single nod, and she watched the relief move through him, like a wave moving through water, visible and real, and something she would remember for a long time. He came around the ring to her. He did not say anything. He put his hand over hers on the fence rail briefly, the way you touch something you have been afraid of losing and have not lost. Then, Silas Crowley came through the auction yard gate. He was not alone. He had a man with him. She had never seen a tall man in a dark coat who moved like a lawyer and carried a leather case that confirmed it. Crowley looked composed. He had the composed look of a man who had been waiting for this moment and had prepared for it carefully. He walked to the auctioneer's table. He produced a document. He spoke to the auctioneer in a voice she couldn't hear from where she stood, but she could see the auctioneer's face, and she could see the auctioneer look from the document to Crowley to the crowd that had begun to notice something was happening. Elias's hand tightened on the fence rail. What is he doing? Elias said. It was not quite a question. Clara was already moving. She crossed the auction yard in the time it took Crowley to turn around, and she reached the auctioneer's table before Crowley had finished whatever he was saying, and she put herself directly in the line of sight of every person in that yard who had a reason to be paying attention. Mr. Crowley, she said. He turned. He looked at her. The composed expression did not change. Whatever document you just presented, Clara said, I would like to see it. This is none of your... I am the account manager of Mercer Ridge Ranch, Clara said. The sale that just concluded was conducted on behalf of Mercer Ridge Ranch. Whatever claim you are making against the proceeds of that sale is my business. The lawyer in the dark coat looked at her with an expression that was professionally neutral, but contained, she thought, a faint trace of interest. She looked at the document in the auctioneer's hand. It was a lien claim against the sale proceeds. A new one, not the original mortgage, something filed separately 3 days ago, claiming unpaid fees and penalties under a clause in the original mortgage that Clara had read 17 times, and that did not say what Crowley's document claimed it said. She read it once. She looked up at Crowley. This clause, she said, pointing to the paragraph in question, applies to penalties assessed within the first 12 months of the mortgage term. Your mortgage with Elias Mercer was signed in February of '82. The penalties you're claiming here are dated August of '83. That is 18 months into the term. She kept her voice level and clear and loud enough for the people around them to hear. This claim is not supported by the document you drafted yourself. The lawyer in the dark coat looked at Crowley. Crowley did not respond immediately. Furthermore, Clara said, the original mortgage instrument, on which all derivative claims depend, is currently under formal review by the County Court of Laramie, with a stay in effect on all foreclosure and lien actions associated with it. A document filed 3 days ago does not supersede a court-ordered stay. She reached into her coat and produced the inquiry letter, which she had been carrying every day for 2 weeks, because she had known something like this was coming. She placed it on the auctioneer's table next to Crowley's document. The auctioneer looked from one to the other. I can't accept a lien claim against a stayed instrument, the auctioneer said slowly. I can't do that, Mr. Crowley. Crowley's lawyer leaned in and said something to him in a low voice. Crowley looked at Clara with an expression that she would remember afterward, not rage, not calculation, but something that had given up one of those things and not yet found the other. A man standing in the gap between who he had been for 20 years and whatever he was about to be forced to become. "This is not finished," he said. "You said that the last time," Clara said. "And yet here we are." He left. His lawyer followed him, and the leather case went with them, and the auction yard settled back into its ordinary noise, and Clara stood at the auctioneer's table with the county court letter in her hand, and felt the ground under her feet the way she had felt it in the ranch yard 3 weeks ago, solid, earned, real. Callahan was at her elbow. "You had that letter on you," he said. "I've had it on me every day since it arrived," she said. He shook his head slowly. "Lord have mercy," he said, but he was smiling when he said it. Elias came to stand beside her, and she handed him the court letter without speaking, and he took it and held it and looked at her. "After the sale," he said quietly. "After the sale," she said. "We're after the sale." He folded the letter carefully and put it in his vest pocket, close to where he kept the things that mattered. They walked out of the auction yard together into the September afternoon, and the town watched them go, and the ground held under every step. The ride back from the auction yard was quiet in the way that things are quiet after a long fight, not empty, not peaceful exactly, but settled. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. The kind you don't rush. Elias rode beside her, and neither of them spoke for the first mile. The afternoon had tipped past its hottest point, and the air had that particular quality of late September, in Wyoming dry and cooling at the edges, the light going gold in a way that made everything look more permanent than it probably was. She did not think about that. She thought about the tally book in her coat pocket, and the number in it, and the court letter folded in Elias's vest, and the fact that they were both still here. That was enough for the first mile. Pete and Dutch had gone ahead to the ranch to check the animals. Callahan had ridden north to his own property, with a handshake for Elias and a nod for Clara that carried more in it than most speeches she had heard. The auction yard was behind them. Crowley was behind them. The number was in the book. "I need to tell you something," Elias said. She looked at him. "I wrote to Ed Rollins 2 days ago," he said, "before the sale. I told him about everything, the inquiry, the stay, the filings, what you found." He paused. "I told him about you." "What did you tell him about me?" "The truth," he said. "That you came here with nothing and you saved everything I had, and I didn't know how to say that plainly enough, but I was going to try." He kept his eyes on the road. He wrote back yesterday. "I got the letter this morning before we left for the sale." She waited. "He said to tell you that any woman who could read a crooked ledger in the dark and stand down a land thief in a public yard was exactly the kind of person his brother-in-law's ranch had always needed, and that he hoped I had the sense to know it." Clara looked at the road ahead. "Ed Rollins sounds like a sensible man," she said. "He is," Elias said. "Always has been." He finally looked at her. "Clara?" "I'm listening," she said. "I've been alone in that house for 2 years, and I told myself that was fine, because the alternative was letting someone in, and the last time I let someone in, she died." He said it directly, the way he said everything important. No ceremony, just the plain fact of it. "Margaret died, and I shut every window in the house, and I told myself that was surviving. But it wasn't surviving. It was just not dying, which is a different thing." "It's a very different thing," Clara said quietly. "You walked in through my gate 7 weeks ago with a folded piece of paper and your father's pencil, and more sense than anyone I've met in 12 years of running this ranch," he said. "And every morning since then, I've woken up in that house, and it's felt like a house again instead of a place I was waiting out." He paused. "I don't know how to say that without it sounding like I'm talking about the ranch." "You're not talking about the ranch," Clara said. "No," he said. "I'm not." She held that for a moment. Held the weight of it the way you hold something you have been careful not to want too much for too long. "I'm not an easy woman to live with," she said. "I keep accounts in my head at all hours. I notice when things are wrong, and I can't leave them wrong. I say what I think when most people would stay quiet." She looked at him. The town has been telling me for 3 years that those things make me difficult. The town, Elias said, told me not to hire you. They did, she said. And I look around this morning and I see a ranch that's still standing and a court inquiry that's going to take Crowley apart piece by piece, and cattle that are heavier than they've been in 3 years, and accounts that are clean for the first time since Margaret died. He looked at her steadily. So I think we both know what the town's opinion is worth. She felt something unlock in her chest. Something she had been holding closed for a long time, longer than 3 years. Longer than Red Willow, something she had started closing the day James died, and Margaret Colby started talking, and the whole town decided she was less than she was. Something that had stayed closed through every morning of cold water and laundry, and borrowed room and careful invisibility. After the sale, she said. You said after the sale. We're after the sale, he said. Then ask me, she said. He stopped his horse. She stopped hers. He looked at her in the late September light with everything that had accumulated between them over 7 weeks. In his face, the heifer and the fence wire, and the morning coffee, and the ledger entries, and the night they chased cattle in the dark, and the moment in the auction yard when she had put herself between his land and the man trying to take it. Stay, he said. Not as hired help, not as my bookkeeper, as the woman who walked through my gate and woke this ranch back up. He paused. As my wife, if you'll have me, when you're ready, in your own time. But stay. Clara Whitcomb looked at Elias Mercer on a dirt road outside Red Willow, Wyoming in the September of 1884, and she thought about every bench that had been pulled away, and every room that had gone quiet when she walked in, and every door that had closed one beat too fast. She thought about her father's ledger pencil in her pocket, and the letter she had written at 4 a.m, and the heifer that had lived because she had known what to do. She thought about the ranch table with the second chair that had appeared one morning 3 weeks ago, without comment pulled up opposite his, as if it had always been there. I'm ready now, she said. He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand and held it not gently, the way a man holds something fragile, but firmly, the way you hold something real. Then let's go home, he said. They did not arrive home to peace. She should have known. She had known in the part of her mind that never stopped calculating the part that had been running Crowley's remaining options since the auction yard, and had come up with 3 scenarios, none of them comfortable. She had simply allowed herself 20 minutes of quiet on a dirt road and told that part of her mind to wait. It had waited long enough. Pete met them at the gate with the particular tight face of a young man trying to hold bad news in an orderly way. What happened? Clara said. She was off her horse before he answered. Man came while we were out, Pete said. Left something nailed to the barn door. He looked at Elias. Dutch took it down. He's inside. They went inside. Dutch was at the kitchen table with a folded paper in front of him that he had not opened, apparently deciding that opening other people's serious mail was above his station. He looked relieved when they came through the door. Elias picked up the paper. He read it. His face did the thing it did when he was angry, went very still, very controlled, the temperature behind his eyes dropping. He handed it to Clara without speaking. It was not an official document. It was not from a lawyer or a court or a bank. It was handwritten on plain paper in a hand she recognized from 2 years of mortgage correspondence. It said that Silas Crowley intended to contest the county court inquiry on the grounds that the instruments in question had been filed in good faith under transitional territorial practice, and that he had retained legal representation in Cheyenne with experience in territorial land law, and that he expected the inquiry to be resolved in his favor within 60 days. It also said, and this was the part that made her jaw tighten, that any individual who had provided testimony or documentation to the county court as part of the inquiry process might be subject to civil action for interference with lawful business practice. Any individual. She set the letter down. He's threatening you, Elias said. His voice was quiet and entirely cold. He's threatening the inquiry, Clara said. He's trying to make the witnesses pull back. She thought for a moment. He sent this same letter to Callahan. I'd wager on it. Can he do it? Pete said. Can he actually? He can file anything he wants, Clara said. Filing a civil suit and winning one are different things. She picked up her coat. I need to write to the court tonight. They need to know he's attempting to intimidate the witnesses. Clara. Elias put his hand on her arm, not stopping her, just present. It's been a long day. It has, she said, and it's not finished yet. He looked at her for a moment. All right, he said. He looked at Dutch. Put coffee on. He looked at Pete. Ride to Callahan's tonight and tell him what came. Tell him Clara says to hold steady and not to let Crowley's letter change anything. Pete was out the door in 30 seconds. Dutch put the coffee on. Clara sat at the desk. She wrote the letter to the county court in the clearest language she knew, which was very clear. She documented the delivery of the note, its contents, its evident intent, and the names of all individuals she believed had received similar communications. She requested that the court acknowledge the inquiry witnesses formally and make clear that civil harassment of inquiry participants would be considered obstruction. She sealed the letter. She looked up. Elias was across the table with his coffee watching her. Done, he said. First draft, she said. I'll read it again in the morning before it goes. Read it now, he said. Out loud. I'll tell you if anything sounds wrong. She looked at him. 2 sets of ears, he said. She read it out loud. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Second paragraph, he said. You wrote alleged intent to intimidate. Take out the word alleged. You know the intent. You don't need to qualify it. She looked at the letter. He was right. She changed it. Anything else? She said. It's a good letter, he said. Your father would think it was a good letter. She folded it. The response from the county court arrived 11 days later, and it was better than she had expected, and worse than she had hoped, which was how legal processes generally worked in her experience. The court acknowledged the witness intimidation concern and issued a formal notice to Crowley's legal representation that harassment of inquiry participants would be considered obstruction. That was the better part. The worst part was that Crowley's Cheyenne lawyers had filed a legitimate procedural challenge to the inquiry itself, arguing that the transitional filing period was a recognized practice under territorial land administration, and that the court was required to hear that argument before ruling, which meant the inquiry would take longer, which meant the stay would remain in place, which was good, which meant nothing would be resolved quickly, which was not. She brought the court letter to Elias and laid it on the table and explained what it meant and watched him absorb it. How long? He said. The procedural challenge could add 2 to 3 months to the inquiry timeline, she said, possibly into the spring. He was quiet. We can survive the winter, she said. The sale proceeds cover Ed's note and the partial mortgage payment. The stay prevents foreclosure. The herd is in better shape than it's been in 3 years. We can survive the winter. And Crowley. Crowley is spending money on Cheyenne lawyers, Clara said. Every week this goes on costs him more than it costs us. He has 7 challenged filings, not just yours. He's fighting on 7 fronts. She paused. He's going to lose. It may take until spring, but he's going to lose. Elias looked at the letter. He looked at her. You're sure? He said. I'm sure, she said. The filings are wrong. The dates are wrong. The county recorder confirmed it in writing. No lawyer in Cheyenne can change what the dates say. He sat back. Something moved through him. Not relief, not yet, but the beginning of something that would become relief when there was room for it. The acknowledgement that the ground was not going to swallow them before spring. All right, he said. All right, she said. She picked up her pencil and turned to the next problem, which was the winter feed calculation, because the cattle were heavier and heavier cattle needed more feed, and the stores needed to be right before the first hard freeze. Elias watched her work for a moment. I'm going to ask Reverend Alcott about a Sunday service, he said. In 2 weeks, if that's... He stopped. If that's enough time. She looked up. "For what?" she said. And then she understood what he meant, and something moved through her that she had no efficient name for. "2 weeks is enough time," she said. He nodded once and went back to his coffee. She went back to the feed calculation. Outside, the first real edge of autumn had come into the air overnight, and the cattle were settled in the north pasture with good grass under them, and the repaired fence held, and the barn stood solid, and the ranch went on existing the way it always had, stubborn and tired, and not finished. The twist came from the direction she had not calculated. 3 days before the Sunday, Reverend Alcott had agreed to a woman knocked on the ranch house door. Clara opened it. It was Ruth Whitcomb, James's mother. She was 71 years old, and she had aged since Clara had last seen her, and she was standing on the porch of Mercer Ridge Ranch with her hands folded in front of her and an expression on her face that Clara had never seen there before, which was the expression of a woman who has come to do something difficult. Clara said nothing. She waited. "I heard about what you did," Ruth Whitcomb said. "At the auction yard, and before that at the ranch." She stopped. "The whole county heard. The whole county can decide what they think about it," Clara said. "I know," Ruth said. "That's—" She stopped again. "I want you to know that I am aware that I said things about you after James died that were not fair, that were not true." Her voice was very even. It cost her something to be this even. "I was a mother who lost her son, and I needed someone to blame, and you were there." She looked at Clara directly. "That's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse, but it's what happened." Clara looked at her for a long moment. She thought about 3 years. She thought about the laundry and the borrowed room and every door and every bench and Margaret Colby and Silas Crowley and the notice board outside the post office. She thought about what her father had said about frightened people. "Come in," Clara said. Ruth Whitcomb came in. She stayed for an hour. They did not become friends in that hour. Some things could not be undone by a single honest conversation, and Clara did not pretend otherwise. But Ruth Whitcomb sat at the table where Clara had worked Elias's accounts for 7 weeks, and drank coffee, and said plainly that she had been wrong, and Clara listened, and when Ruth left, she looked smaller than when she had arrived, and also somehow lighter. Elias found Clara at the desk an hour later, not working, just sitting with her hands flat on the surface. "Who was that?" he said. "James's mother," Clara said. He went still. "She apologized," Clara said. "Or she tried to. It was the best version of an apology she knew how to make." She looked at her hands. "I don't know what to do with it yet." "You don't have to do anything with it yet," Elias said. "No," she said, "I don't." She was quiet for a moment. "It doesn't change what happened. It doesn't give me back the 3 years." "No," he said. "But she came," Clara said. "She didn't have to come. Nobody made her come." She looked up. "My father used to say that people can surprise you if you give them long enough." "Sounds like he was right again," Elias said. "He usually was," she said. Elias put his hand on her shoulder briefly, and she put her hand over his briefly, and then she picked up her pencil, and he went back to his work, and the house held them both in its quiet, ordinary way. The Sunday service was small. Reverend Alcott officiated. Birch Callahan and his wife stood with them, and Pete and Dutch stood in the back, and Hester Finch was there in her good coat bent at the spine and fiercely upright, because Hester Finch had sent word that she intended to be present, and Clara had not argued with her. Margaret Colby came. Clara had not expected that. She saw her come in through the side door and take a seat in the back, alone, her hands folded in her lap, and she thought about the harvest supper and the bench and the pot of stew, and the fact that she had not spilled a single drop. She looked at Elias standing beside her. He was wearing a clean shirt, and his good vest and his weathered hat was in his hands, and he was looking at her with the direct, clear look that she had come to understand was how he expressed everything he didn't say out loud, which was most of what mattered to him. Reverend Alcott spoke the words. She said the words back. Elias said the words back. The ring was plain silver, his mother's, which he had kept in the tin box with the mortgage documents for 2 years. He put it on her finger, and she held very still, and let herself feel the weight of it, the small, solid fact of it, without flinching. She was Clara Mercer now. The name settled on her the way a good coat settles, not all at once, but the right fit was there from the first moment. Outside afterward, Birch Callahan's wife embraced her, which she had not expected, and she stood in it for a moment and let herself be held by someone who had no reason to hold her except genuine warmth, and that was its own kind of thing. Hester Finch took both her hands. "I always knew you were more than they said," Hester said. "You're the only one who did," Clara said. "I wasn't," Hester said. "Your father knew, and now this man knows." She looked at Elias. "That's enough. That's always been enough." Margaret Colby stopped her on the way to the horses. She did not try to embrace her. She was wise enough to know the limits of what she had earned. "Congratulations," she said. It came out stiff the way genuine things come out when a person is not practiced at them. Clara looked at her. "Thank you for coming, Margaret," she said. Not warmly, not coldly. Honestly. The way you acknowledge something that happened without assigning it more weight than it carries. Margaret nodded. She stepped back. She let them pass. The county court ruling came in the second week of November, and it was everything the dates had promised it would be. The formal finding was that instruments filed prior to the official opening date of the Red Willow County Land Office were invalid as recorded instruments under territorial law. Crowley's lien transfers on 7 properties, including Mercer Ridge Ranch and the Callahan property, were declared void. The mortgages themselves, which had been originated through a separate bank in Laramie, remained valid debts. But without Crowley's fraudulent lien structure, the interest rates reverted to the standard territorial rate, and the false penalties and inflated charges that Clara had documented were formally disallowed. The difference on Mercer Ridge Ranch alone was $940. She sat with the ruling letter for a long time before she showed it to Elias. When she did, he read it through twice, and then he set it down and looked at the wall for a moment, and then he looked at her. $940, he said. That he took, Clara said. That he never had the right to take. Is there a way to get it back? There may be, she said. The court ruling creates grounds for a civil claim. Callahan is already talking to a lawyer in Laramie. If the other 5 ranchers join, she paused. It would take time. It might take another year, but the grounds are real. Elias looked at her. Do it, he said. It'll be complicated, she said. You're good at complicated, he said. She almost smiled. I'll write to Callahan tomorrow, she said. Write tonight? He said. After supper, she said. He almost smiled back. She did write that night after supper at the desk where she had first opened his ledger in August and found the wrong numbers that started everything. The fire was low and the house was warm, and Elias was reading in the chair by the fireplace, the same chair she had first seen him sitting in when she turned around with the documents in her hands 7 weeks ago. The house had curtains on the windows now. She had made them herself from fabric she had ordered from the dry goods store, because a house with uncovered windows in a Wyoming winter was an inefficiency she could not leave unaddressed. She wrote the letter to Callahan. She wrote it clearly and completely the way she wrote everything, and she sealed it, and she set it by the door to go out in the morning. Then she sat for a moment at the desk. She thought about the notice board outside the Red Willow post office. The piece of rough-cut board with the thick pencil letters. No troublemakers and no gossips. She had taken that notice down and carried it in her pocket to a gate she had never been through before, to a man she had never met, and she had handed him the other set of pliers, and they had fixed a fence in the August heat, and it had been the beginning of the only thing she had built that nobody could take from her. She reached into the desk drawer and found a piece of paper. She wrote at the top, Season's Accounts, Mercer Ridge Ranch, 1884. She wrote the opening balance. It was the largest opening balance she had ever written on a first page. It was earned, every cent of it. She heard Elias set his book down across the room. Still working, he said. Starting, she said. New ledger. A pause. Come to bed, Clara, he said, not impatiently. The way a man says something he has been wanting to say for a long time and has finally earned the right to say it simply. She capped the ink. She set down her father's pencil. She had spent 3 years being invisible in a town that had decided she was nothing, and she had walked through that invisibility every single day without becoming nothing. And she had carried her father's pencil in her pocket like a promise she had made to herself about what she was worth and what she was capable of, and what she would not give up regardless of what anyone said. She was not invisible anymore. She was Clara Mercer of Mercer Ridge Ranch, and the accounts were clean, and the fence held, and the land was theirs, and she had known what she was worth the whole time she had simply been waiting for a place to prove it. She pushed back the chair. She went to where she belonged. A woman does not become worthy when the world finally notices her. She was worthy all along, and the world had simply run out of ways to pretend otherwise.